Hey, Chelsea, thanks so much for joining Grief Refuge and sharing your experience and your stories on this podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and chat with you today.
Yeah, appreciate that. And, right off the bat, it's when I hear you say you're excited to be here, we're obviously talking about a topic that most people aren't excited about. So, how is it that you find yourself being excited to talk about grief and loss and some of the healing aspects or coping mechanisms that you've experienced along your journey?
Yeah, I think the first thing it excites me that people are talking about this. I love the work that you're doing and the awareness that you're bringing to this hard topic and the resources that you're providing for individuals that are struggling with, the loss of a loved one. And so I'm always thrilled to join people who are in that advocacy and in that mission to help people. And if knowing that my pain and my experience and just sharing my story might give somebody else the courage to share their own or, find benefit in that makes everything worth it.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. It sounds like in this phase of your life, as we have this conversation and get to know each other, advocacy is really, is it fair to say, a passion for you?
Absolutely. Yes. And I
Okay.
can say that now because my loss of my mother happened in 2017. And so time has not healed me completely, but it's changed my perspective and it's changed my purpose in life. And I think that when you go through something profound like this, it has the ability to shatter you in harsh ways and also picking them up and creating something with them in beautiful ways. And so my hope is just that to advocate for others so that they don't have to stay silent in their struggle, so they don't have to stay silent in their pain, and just create that community of comfort and encouragement and commonality in this experience, which is so universal. Everybody's going to go through this in their life at some point if they haven't already. And so I think it's important for me.
Yeah, thanks for delving more into that. You mentioned your mom and losing her, and one of the intentions that I'll set in our conversation is to honor her. And, from the information, the background information that you've shared with me, I can tell you are honoring her. I think there was something about honoring a lasting legacy in your is it your first book that you wrote, right?
Yes, my very first book absolutely came out this year, just a couple weeks ago.
Oh, congratulations. That's a big accomplishment. And yeah, we'll talk more about that. And also there was the experience of me having an assumption that you're quite a writer, right? You also blog, is that true?
Yeah, I started writing for myself just to heal. I always heard the therapeutic benefits of it, and I always was a creative soul. But then I started a platform called Happiness, Hope, and Harsh Realities that became a blog and a website, and then eventually a social media page where every day I would just show up and be raw and authentic and write a few paragraphs about what my grief was like that day. And really having no expectation of what would happen with that. And I realized just in sharing my own story and my own vulnerabilities and my own kind of grief triggers that other people were sharing too. And so it just became, my writing ended up becoming a platform for people to share in their own experiences. And then also gave them words for the people that didn't have them to share that with maybe their father or their husband or their friend and say, this is what I'm trying to say of how I'm feeling right now. I just haven't had the words. And so I feel like it was just this, perfect web of helping myself, helping others, and, using the words that I feel like have just been given to me for a greater good than just myself.
The words, when you say they've been given to you, is it okay to ask like the source of where the words come from?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I'm a faithful person, though I haven't always been. Grief kind of shattered my faith for a while. And then eventually I found my way back into the faith that my mom had kind of built our lives around. And so I don't know necessarily, sometimes I think it is God giving me these words, but also I think that a lot of times it's my mom's influence and my mom's impact on my life and the reminders of her memory that give me the words to help other daughters and other hearts that are like mine. And just those reminders of her influence that come out onto the screen, when I'm typing.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Thank you.
You mentioned grief shattered your faith for a while, and I think that's kind of where I'd like to go as far as carrying this conversation forward at this point. You said you lost your mom in 2017, right?
Yes, she was 57.
57. And her name?
Rita.
Rita. Okay. And Rita unfortunately left you at a young age. 57 is young,
Yep.
in this modern times. And was it unexpected to lose your mom, Rita?
I always use the word unexpected, and some people I think that know me are a little bit shocked by that because my mom did pass away from cancer. She had multiple cancers in her life. However, they were never spread. They were just different occurrences. And so when she had her first cancer scare, she came out of it, swimmingly and great. And so when the next one came, she did the same thing. And so when the final cancer diagnosis came about, we just assumed she would heal from that too. And unfortunately, she didn't. And so the unexpected part for me comes in that year in 2017, right around Valentine's Day. She found out that her breast cancer had come back, and they gave her 2+ years to live. And that was a hard number to deal with. But we didn't get that because by July, just months later, she was gone. And so for me, it was unexpected because, we've kind of wrapped our brains around the promises that sometimes doctors can give us, which are not actual promises or estimations of life. And we kind of thought we had time, and we didn't. And so for me, I would say it was unexpected, though others may not view it in that way.
Yeah. And with your faith and some of the values instilled from your mom, Rita, how would you describe that faith?
Yeah, so she was just a beautiful, faithful woman in everything that she did. We were raised in the church. And more than that, for me, it was how she lived her life for other people and giving back and compassion and empathy and all of those things that made it so much more solidified into my life, because it wasn't like she was just sitting in the pews of a church telling us about, God and faith and all of these things, but she was living it in each day. And it was a beautiful thing to witness. And I don't think I valued it enough until she was gone, unfortunately. But when you see a woman like that living such a faithful life and then pass away at 57, while she wasn't afraid and while she held that faith to the very last moment, for me, it did the opposite. It really shattered my faith because I thought, why her? Why a woman like her that is doing so much good in the world? That's, living up to all the things that she's supposed to be in this world. And so for me, it honestly shattered my faith. But for a while, I thought it was non-existent. I thought that it no longer existed for me.
Mhm.
And through time, I realized that it was just challenged, that it was still there. I just had to find it again and really find a way to believe in it for myself, not for the world or for other people or even for her. And so it's taken a long time. I mean, it took years of really just diving into my grief and my future and my, changed outlook of what my life is going to be like now to get through all of that. And so now I can say that I'm probably more faithful than I ever have been. And I say faithful, not religious, because I do think they're a little bit different. But I think now, in just living with this, my mom would be proud of where I am today and that I came to it on my own terms, no matter what that timeline looked like.
Mhm. Wow. Um, yeah, it's interesting because here we are, you're articulating a long process that, and you're summing it up in a few sentences. And I just want everyone, listening to pause and take a moment and understand that Chelsea has, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Chelsea, but like, I think of the word battled, but that's not the best word, but is it fair to say struggled? Sometimes moments of struggle. And, earlier at the beginning of our conversation, you said time didn't heal. Time was a contributor. And yet, it's too easy to say, like, I need to move on. It's too easy to think like, you know, just don't feel like, there's enough support, nobody cares or something like that, or very few people care. And therefore it's like, got to move forward quickly. It's like, it's interesting because even if there's not direct pressures on us from our external sources, somehow, because of like the way life happens around us, it creates, somehow contributes to an internal pressure. And for you, Chelsea, like, what about those moments where you were like, oh my gosh, can I just no longer be grieving? Or oh my gosh, like, you said you dove into it. Like, when you said that, it made me think there might have been moments where you told yourself maybe you should be over, these feelings that you're experiencing, or maybe like there was some avoidance patterns or something. But like, I'm really curious about, for you, when you said, I really need to dive into this, like, kind of what was going on at that time you made that decision?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I love the word battle actually, because I do feel like that's what it was. And often I've told people before that I felt like grief was kind of like a boxing ring at
Mm.
first. I felt like someone placed me in there and I was fighting everything. I was fighting my faith, I was fighting my future, I was fighting just tasks that were, simple responsibilities. I felt like I was fighting everything. And the punches for me were, starting with her diagnosis and then her death. And so there was that battle. And I think that by diving into it, I think I realized that, if I love being by the water. And so it's a very calming place for me. But the waves are coming no matter what, and you cannot stop it. And so you can either choose to swim and float and find your way, or you can struggle and get nowhere. And eventually that's going to make you sink. And so I realized I didn't want to sink too. I didn't want my mother's death to also be the end of my life. And not just in the aspect of breathing and a heartbeat, but actually living. I feel like for so long I was surviving, but I wasn't living. And then I'm pausing my life the second my mom lost hers. And that's not fair for my husband, my children, my family. And so I think diving in for me was really realizing I don't have to accept this because I don't know what acceptance looks like, but I have to comprehend that this is my truth, this is my reality, and I have to find a way to move on, but not necessarily moving on, moving forward, carrying all of this, carrying the grief and the pain, but also carrying the memory and the legacy and the love too. And just figuring all of that out, whatever that looks like. And for me, it looks different than even it looked like for my sister who was grieving, the same woman, our mother. And it looks different for everybody. But for me, that's kind of what, the battle and the journey was.
Yeah, that's very wise. And is that when you took to writing? When
Yeah.
it
I think
was?
I think that what happened is it was me realizing that I needed to figure this out, that I hadn't been taught this. There wasn't a manual for how to get through this. And so I had to figure out what it looked like for me. And I also learned that grief makes people uncomfortable. Even your closest friends, even the people in your church, even the people in your neighborhood that you talk to every day. I realized that heartbreak and things that cannot be easily fixed make people shy away and very uncomfortable. And so I didn't want to put what I felt like at the time was a burden on anyone else. So I started writing thinking, I'll just get out all these things I really want to say to people when they ask if I'm okay, or they ask how I'm doing, or if they ask if I'm over it already, and just started putting it down on my paper and on my screen to help myself. And it became a beautiful, beautiful thing beyond what I could have even imagined it would become.
Hmm. At first, I'm also assuming it wasn't beautiful. Was it messy? Was it ugly? What
Oh,
was
it's
it like
always
at
messy.
first?
It's always ugly. Even to this day, I still, I always tell people, when you talk about grief as, stages, for me, I really felt like it was a labyrinth or a web, of you're constantly going through it. And, you're also, I realized that you're always a conflicting emotions always. So, I can be happy and I can also be hurting. I can be excited and I can also have an ache that my mom isn't going to be there at the thing that we might be going to. And so realizing that you're kind of living contradictory emotions at all times, but that's okay. You can be both forever and there's still beauty in that and there's still purpose in that.
Are you able to recall, Chelsea, a time or a moment, an event, something where you're recognizing like a bit of a transition in some of your emotional state?
Yeah, I remember sitting at a coffee shop and the change is that I was sitting at this coffee shop and I was actually writing for my book. And I saw a woman and her daughter, and they were sitting next to me, and I could overhear their conversation. And they were talking about their wedding, and her wedding was coming up. And tears started flowing, immediately because in grief, tears come whether you want them to or not. And I remember feeling so excited for this daughter that she had her mom there because I didn't. My mom passed away in July. My wedding was in September, just months apart. And I didn't feel the jealousy and kind of the not anger, but some of those more harsh emotions that I felt at first because the first year, even the first 2 years, when I would see a mother and a daughter, I would feel so empty and I would feel so jealous that I didn't have that anymore. Not that I wanted to take it from them, but just that I wanted what I always had too, and I didn't have it anymore. And so that shift in realizing that the pain and the jealousy had now become beauty in that somebody else still got to experience their mom in a moment that I didn't. And I realized, oh, I think this is what healing looks like. I think this means the wound is still there because the tears are still coming. And there's still a little bit of a hollowed spot that I'm feeling, but also that this is what wound that you have is more like a scar now. It's there and I can feel it, but I see so much more gratitude than grief.
That's a great insight. I really like that articulation. Oh, that's beautiful. That's
Oh,
something I
thank
could
you.
really reflect on for a moment. I also have an impression that some of your advocacy work involves the sharing of personal stories. And I'm remembering, Chelsea, that you said some of your community people are uncomfortable around grief, And so with your support networks, did you feel like there was space to share more of your story of loss, and, the story of your mother's legacy?
Yeah, I think that I am blessed and I know it that I have a wonderful support system in my friends and in my family. But the difference for me and the identifying factor was not that I couldn't share it with some of them because I did. They're my safe space. And I do feel like those are my people that are worthy of my grief because not everybody is. But the difference that I found was they didn't understand. They could not connect something of their life with what I was going through because they hadn't dealt with that before. And a lot of my friends still had their grandparents. So when I lost my mother, that was just something they couldn't, grasp in their mind. And honestly, I wouldn't want them to. But what I was aching for was somebody else who got it. Not that I want anybody else to have to share this heartbreak, but I was just desperate for somebody else to say, me too. Or I understand. I've been in the grocery aisle and sobbed in the bakery, lane buying stuff for a recipe that my mom used to make, little things like that really caught me by surprise. And so I think I was looking for a community of other people that just understood what this was like and that we could have that shared space of empathy and compassion because we have walked a similar path. And that was important to me, I think.
And were you able to find that community or did you create it?
I think both. I think that by creating it, I found it and it helped myself and other people. And I think I didn't know what it would become when I first created it. I think I always had the hope and the wish that that's what would become of it. But until it actually happened, it didn't feel real.
Hmm. And I'm also assuming it was created more online, right?
Yes, all online.
Okay. Yeah, online can be very powerful platforms, to create groups, groups of similar type of losses or similar type of experiences. And so thank you for starting that because it's a source of comfort to many. And what is the name of that group?
Yeah, so it's just happiness, hope, and harsh realities on Facebook and Instagram. And it's at hope and harsh realities. But if you search either of those things, you'll find it. And yeah, it's primarily a place just of grief. And I speak on the loss of my mother because that's my experience. And while most of the people there are women who have lost a mother, I also have readers that have lost husbands or children. And I want it to be a space where all of grief is welcome. And that's been such a beautiful thing because, when you release your words on a platform or in a book, it's your story. And I love hearing from others that, my story has reminded them of a time in their own life or shifted their perspective to a more light-filled, viewpoint than maybe the darkness and the heartbreak. And so, yeah, I'm proud of what I've created, but it's only possible because of the contributions and the reading of everybody that's there. And so I always like to say I have hearts, not followers. A lot of people will talk about how many followers, but I really think that, these are hearts behind all of these faces on Facebook or Instagram. And my hope is to reach each one where they are, wherever that may be. Some of them are at day one, and some of us, like me, are at day 7 or year 7 or year 20.
Yeah, in my opinion, it is something that loss and grief, it's something that morphs, it's something that evolves, it continues to shape and mold, our personalities. Um, at the time of this recording, we're just a few days past Labor Day weekend in the US. And I remember having a moment. We're doing a little bit of some home remodel work and I was doing some work and I was by myself and you mentioned the wave of grief. I really felt like kind of this overwhelming sensation of what felt like loss. And I was surprised by it. Because I was like, wait a minute, like, I don't think there's like a death anniversary at this time of the year. And I'm not thinking of anyone in particular. And at the same time, I'm like, I need to take a moment. Like, I need to take a moment and kind of like feel into this. This is kind of like wearing me out, wiping me down. And And why am I sharing all this? Because after sitting with the feelings for a bit, I was like, oh, you know, I'm it's one of those moments of like grieving my father. And I was like, how strange, my father died 18 and a half years ago.
Right.
And I was like, that's just kind of came from nowhere, but yet there it was, and it was real. And so like, yeah, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that, you're sharing your voice. I'm grateful that you're providing, a community and a platform for people to articulate their experiences. The sharing of our story is incredibly valuable in our personal healing. And it sounds like you also, you took it to another level and you published a book. And, what's the name of the book you published, Chelsea?
Yeah, so it's called Now That She's Gone, A Daughter's Reflections on Loss, Love, and a Mother's Legacy. And really for me, it was that last piece, a mother's legacy. And the creation of this book is entirely from remembering sitting at the table of the priest that was going to perform my mother's funeral, and going through all of these things and getting pamphlets from the funeral home, and then getting flowers from people, and then getting casseroles. And I felt like nothing I got helped me or gave me insight or stayed. The flowers go, the casseroles get eaten, the pamphlets get thrown away because you don't look at them. And I wanted something that people could gift women or people that are going through the loss of a mother, that would stay with them, that could meet them wherever they are. It's not a book that you have to read in order. It can be, I say, take what you need when you need it, because that's kind of what grief is like. You don't know what you need always. And so I really just wanted it to honor my mom's legacy and just be beautiful inside and out, that would help people wherever they are in their grief.
Hmm. I don't want to instigate a spoiler alert, but would you be willing to share a piece of one of your favorite stories in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll share the first one, as it's the day she dies, and it's a piece that I'm known for online, but one that is the most meaningful to me because so many women and children have written me and said they've read this at their mother's funeral. And knowing that the loss of my mother would contribute to such a meaningful and impactful day and moment has meant more to me than almost any other accomplishment in my life. And so I think it's the most meaningful one. It makes me tear up just thinking about it. But this is called The Day That She Dies. The day that she dies, for a moment, you'll stop breathing too. You'll wonder how the world continues to go on around you. The day she dies, a piece of you will die too. You'll learn this is a piece that you cannot fill. It is a piece that cannot be replaced by anything ever. The day she dies, you'll start your new life. Your new life will be motherless. It will be different from before in the most heartbreaking way. The day she dies, you will look around and question everything. You'll question your faith, your last words to her, and every moment you spent away from her. Your questions will never be answered, but keep asking them anyway. The day she dies, you'll be in complete disbelief. You will refuse to accept this debilitating reality, but it will stay with you, and one day it will sink in. That day will be just as bad as the day that she dies. The day she dies, you will be frozen with heartbreak, confusion, and terror. You will develop anxieties and fears that you never had before. Some days, these new fears will be paralyzing. The day she dies, you become an adult, the kind of adult that no longer has a mother. That is a different kind of adult than you were before. Trust me. The day she dies, you will long for her hug, her kiss, her time, and her presence. This longing never goes away. It stays with you, but so does she, because the day she dies, you gain the most beautiful champion. You can't see her, but she is there just as she promised. The day she dies, you will look around at all of the people supporting you and helping you pick up the pieces. The people who show up are your people. Never forget the ones who showed up. They are special. The day she dies, you'll learn that you loved so hard, so deeply, so purely, that you will now grieve hard because of that beautiful love. The day she dies, you'll learn that she loved you beyond measure. She mothered you more beautifully than any Hallmark movie could ever portray. She believed in you more than you ever believed in yourself. You'll realize that she took care of you like you were the most precious cargo on the planet, even in your adulthood. The day she dies, you'll realize without hesitation that she was the most amazing woman you'll ever know and will ever know. The day she dies, you'll appreciate her more than you ever have, and you'll pray to have her back. Unfortunately, no prayers can bring her back, no wishes can make her appear. So when she dies, remember her smile, remember her love, and remember her life. Never forget her and everything she was, because the day she dies, you become her legacy.
That's beautiful, very heartfelt, very touching, very
Thank you.
honest.
Yeah, very honest.
Yeah, at a loss for words on that. I can
Well, and I
see.
think that's one thing that was important to me in my writing was to be extremely honest, even sometimes when it felt brutal, because those were the truths about grief that I didn't know, and those were the ones that surprised me. And so I thought, if I can help others be a little less surprised, a little bit less, taken aback by this, then that will have been for a good.
Hmm. Chelsea, I'm guessing you've read that out loud before, and I'm curious, as you read and reflect on some of your own writing, and at the time you wrote that, what do you find yourself remembering the most about Rita, your mom?
Oh, I love that question. Um, yeah, I've read it a lot, and now I can read it without full-fledged crying, But the beautiful thing is, I always tell people, if I cry, it's a beautiful thing because it means I'm remembering my mom. And the thing I love and miss most about my mother is just I always knew she was there for me. It did not matter what time of day, it didn't matter if I thought I might disappoint her. Her love, her support, and her comfort were unwavering and endless. And the beauty that I found is that I thought that that was completely lost. And now, 7 years later, I get choked up to say it, but I've learned that she is still here. She's simply here in a way that I can't see or comprehend, but that a mother's love does not dissipate with her heartbeat or her breath, that it is here. It's just different. It's shifted into memory and reminiscence, but it's right here. And so I try on my hardest days and my weakest moments to remember that truth.
I don't know if there's anything to say to follow up to that. That's so gorgeous. And I think that's the true essence of maintaining a connection, with someone so important, someone so special, someone who has kind of been in everything to your life. And a lot of people who seek me out, Chelsea, they ask, how do I keep a connection to whomever they're thinking of? And the simple answer is to honor their memory, but no, not at first. Nobody wants that.
Right.
They want to keep pieces of almost like the living part of the loved one they've lost. And so there's a shift, like you said, and a bit of a new perspective of like, I like to think of it as a spiritual connection, and I know that not everybody identifies as being spiritual, but at the same time, there's something in the energy and there's something in the memory of being able to connect on some level. And I think what you've shared today has really touched the hearts of many. It's inspired them, and also, it's provided a source of safety and comfort, in their own loss. So for that, I am truly grateful. Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. And I think, like I said before, I think what you're doing is so important and powerful. And so I'm just glad to be here speaking with you.
Awesome. So as we get closer to saying goodbye, I want to ask you, is there anything left unsaid? Do you feel that, in your head or in your heart, there's just something more to communicate in this conversation?
I don't think so. I think just, realizing to anybody that's going through grief, like, you know, there is no timeline, there is no cure, there is no, bandage. It's just really living it each day and trying to carry forward with more light than darkness, whatever that looks like for you. And I always tell people, you are someone's legacy, but you get to choose when you do something with it, And some people are ready right away and some people aren't, and that's okay. You're always going to be their legacy, and one day you'll do something with it.
Awesome. Well said. Thanks for being a source of inspiration in this space of loss and grief. And, I'm sure there's people that do want to contact you. So let us know the best way to contact you, Chelsea.
Yeah, so my website is www.hopeandharshrealities.com. And like I said, you can follow me on social media at Hope and Harsh Realities. And yeah, my book is available at wherever books are sold. And my ultimate goal is just to help hearts, that are like mine, that have an ache, but also a purpose and a mission to do something with their loss.
Awesome. Thank you. So from this point forward, is there a next step that you're clear on for your work, or are you just going to follow your heart, or where are things at for you?
Yeah, I think that this book came to be because my readers asked for it. And I think, yeah, I'm following my heart. And more than anything, I just am hoping to be led into the spaces of people that need to hear my words and my story. And I'm just on a mission to make sure that anybody that's feeling this loss feels less alone and supported. And so I'm just hoping to be directed into those spaces wherever they may be.
Wonderful. Please keep up the great work. It's really important for many. And thanks again for sharing your experience, sharing your mother, Rita, and sharing your advocacy on the Grief Refuge podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I love listening, so I'm going to love being a part of it.
Thanks for listening to the full episode. If you need more support, I encourage you to visit griefrefuge.com, where you can find our Grief Refuge app, and you can also find grief care services. Thanks again. Take care. Be kind to yourself, and talk to you soon.